welcome to Can't Stop the Pop, the podcast where we, that's me, Craig,
and me, Matty,
do a deep dive on a song from the 90s or noughties, except not today, because we're jumping forward just slightly to 2010.
Because we're also going to introduce our wonderful special guest. It's Joe McElderry. Hello.
Woo! Oh, that's really loud, sorry.
How are you guys?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Thank you so much for coming on with us. This means a lot. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We are here to talk about. Craig, what song are we talking about of Joe's? What song are we doing?
We are talking about ambitions. So I know your immediate thoughts because you've been texting me about it. But what are your immediate thoughts about this banger?
I think, Joe, it's such a pop banger, and I loved it at the time, and I still love it now. And I think that it's just a perfect little pop song, and I think it's was such a lovely introduction to kind of you after the X Factor of who you were at the time. But yeah, I really, really love it. Looking back on it, Joe, what are your initial quick fire thoughts of this song when looking back?
Well, obviously it was kind of the first introduction to me from the show. Everybody had all of these kind of preconceived ideas of what they thought I was going to do. And I'd historically sang a lot of ballads on the show. So it was a real curveball in terms of a first release. And it wasn't going to be the first single. It wasn't even going to be a part of the album at the beginning. And then This song landed on the doorstep of the record label, and it changed the whole project, which was, I think I'd recorded by this point, because you come out of the show, you do the X Factor tour, and you start the kind of recording process maybe around April time. And I think midway through the summer, I'd recorded maybe about 6 or 7 songs for the album of the sound that we thought it was going to be. And at that point in time, it was going to be a kind of pop rock country, which there is still elements on the Wide Awake album. But then this song came, and the label were like, we think we should go with this as the first single. And I was like, okay, that's different. It changed the whole narrative of the album, which in a way I'm kind of glad, because I'm really proud of that first album. But it wasn't kind of the obvious choice to be the first single. But I do love the song. Yeah. So I'm glad we did go with it.
Great. Well, Craig, before we get into the beef of the song, usually we say, who is Joe McElderry and why are we talking about this song? But Joe, we're just going to ask you in a brief statement, who would you say you introduce yourself if someone has never heard of who you are, which I don't think anyone will know.
God, I've never. Who is? Well, I'm an entertainer. I like to think of myself as an entertainer, and yeah, I suppose that would be how I would describe myself. My career's kind of been varied in terms of pop, musical theatre, and television, and many different things. So I wouldn't say I'm just a singer. I'm an entertainer, and yeah, I like to bring a little bit of fun to the party. That's what I'll say.
Oh, I love that. I mean, so that's great. So
great.
We've obviously already talked a little bit about the song, but I just, for a little bit of extra context for anyone that doesn't know, I actually learned something as well doing some preparation for this episode, because I do, believe it or not, prepare. We do. That it's a cover, but it's in a loose sense, because the original by Donkeyboy wasn't actually released in the UK, so it is a cover, but it's one of those. It was a big hit in Norway. So, how were you from? Did they come to you and say, "Well, this song exists and this is what it sounds like," and you were like, "Oh," and then what do you do with it? You'd be like, "Okay, well, I've heard it now. I can't unhear it, but how do I put my own stamp on it? How did that
work?" Well, We were recording kind of back and forwards. I was doing a lot of sessions over to America, but mostly of my recording sessions for that album were based in London. But I was doing kind of like back then, I suppose, like a Zoom call over to America and doing like kind of recording sessions in the middle of the night over to LA. There was a couple of songs I recorded from writers over there. And, when you come off a show like X Factor, it kind of massively helps the profile of the show that a lot of songwriters then want to have their songs included on your first release because they know it's going to have a slot on the show, that you've got a kind of a good chance of a chart position. And, at the end of the day, I think people sometimes forget songwriting is a business and they want as much exposure as possible for their songs. So I'd gone over to Sweden to do some recording, which I recorded the B-side of Ambitions, which was called If You Love Me. And that was in the big studios where Red One was based and where they'd written Lady Gaga, Just Dance. Very cool place to go. Yeah, it was like...
I can just see you doing like poker face, babe. Like I could.
I think at the time I was wandering around.
Who wouldn't?
Just shouting Red One, yes. But obviously it was really cool to kind of go out there, and it literally, when you go to the recording studios in Sweden, it is literally like a hit factory. There's like, if you imagine like a load of kind of shipping containers with studios built in them, they're all piled on top of each other in this huge studio. And some of the biggest songwriters are just sat in these studios, just writing hit songs after hit songs. And I can't quite remember because it's a little bit of a blur, but I believe after I'd returned back from Sweden, somebody who I'd been working with out there had said, have you heard this song? It's been number one in Sweden for 12 weeks over the last few months. And we think this would be a massive hit in the UK. And would Joe consider doing it? But I don't know who it was at the time. I think it might have been one of the writers or the producers I'd been working with. So they sent this demo over, which was obviously completely different to the original version by Donkeyboy. And I remember at the time, the label didn't want it to be called Ambitions as well. I remember there was a whole kind of... they have board meetings about everything in record labels. It's crazy. Like a full 1-hour meeting as to whether the song was then going to be called Somebody instead of Ambitions. And and then I went over to Jersey with the producer who was producing my album, Nigel, and we kind of messed around with this version that obviously you now hear as the single. And I was kind of like, I can't sing that high. And he was like, you can, you've got that falsetto in your voice, like just give it a couple of times round. And I was having an absolute meltdown in the studio, being like, I've got to sing this live, I can't do it like this. And but it was just tapping into a voice. It was tapping into a part of a voice that I'd never really used before. And we kind of went through it. It took about a day to record, and we went in and out and had a break and then went back in. And then that was kind of the finished product of Ambitions. And it's kind of that famous falsetto start is now what it's become very well known for. So it was a good choice. But I was stressed at the time because it was hard.
I definitely wrote in my notes that I was like, that falsetto is a bold beginning. I was like, it's just coming in straight out the gate. And my question was kind of going to be from that of like, was there ever a question of, is this too gimmicky or is this just strong star? And like, was there ever a question of you placing it in a different way? Or was it just, you're doing the falsetto, you're going to do it?
I think it was like, if this is going to work, it's got to be different, and we've got to kind of lean into that and make it the kind of feature of the song. And it, at the time, I think, Mika had kind of done Grace Kelly not long before that. It was and a lot of people were kind of like, this could have a kind of Scissor Sisters feel. And there was kind of many references that we drew on to kind of lean into that style, because it wasn't my style. That was not how I'd sang on the show. Nobody had heard us sing like that. And then I think one of the kind of the original plans was to kind of release the song but make people guess who it was. That was going to be one of the kind of promotional marketing strategies of like playing it on Radio 1 and being like, can you guess who this singer is? And then I can't remember why it didn't end up happening, probably due to some different kind of promotional strategy that they were going to do instead. But yeah, there was going to be a kind of, let's release it and be like, can you guess who this is? But it was...
How very Masked singer of you. Who's behind the mask?
But it was really exciting, and it kind of it happened. The song happened in such a quick way in the recording process, and it really did change the whole path of the album. You know, it brought in that kind of that Europop sound. There's a song on the first album called Fahrenheit. I wouldn't have recorded that song. I wouldn't
Tune.
have recorded that song had it have
Absolute
not been
tune.
for Ambitions, and that's one of my favorite songs off that album. And yeah, it really changed the style certainly of the album, and it became more of a. I don't think I would have released such a kind of high energy pop album had it not have been for Ambitions, because I think that the plan before that was very different.
I just I find it really interesting that this song starts with that distorted guitar, and for me, when I remember distinctly when I first heard it, it started and I went, oh, I know where this song is going to go. This is going to be like a kind of like a pop rock, Don't Stop
Yes,
Believing
yes,
style type song. And then the falsetto comes in and you're just very much taken aback and you're like, whoa, okay. So I kind of love the idea that they were going to put it on radio and not say who it was.
yeah,
Like that's, to me, that's sort of, I feel like that's a sort of marketing strategy that would go down really well
yes,
today, you know, in the sort of like social media TikTok
yeah.
era, you know. Um, I mentioned there, like, Don't Stop Believing. Obviously, that was a song that you did when you were on the show. Did you think in your head, as you say, that was just going to be the direction that you'd go? Or, like, was there any pushback from you in terms of the style that you were going to have, that you were going to do with the song?
Well, I think like naturally, like I said before, the songs that get presented to you, kind of people, then you start to kind of work out what people's preconceived idea of your style is based on the show. But obviously, the show is a great showcase. But also back then, you know, we didn't ever do original songs on the show. It was covers. It was always a themed week.
No.
So you were kind of always singing to fit in with the theme of the television show. And I think, yes, you know, my voice has lent itself to ballads um and that kind of style of music and musical theatre as well. But I love nothing more than doing pop music as well. So it was kind of, I suppose for me, I was finding me way where I sat in the industry. But at that time, you're also kind of like the most watched person in the music industry to see what you're going to do. So it's quite a difficult space to
Yeah.
navigate through because you kind of can't win either way. Because, you know, you've had all of these people that have voted for you on a television show, but then you're also trying to reach a market in a music industry that you haven't been established in, and the kind of the television side of that and the music side of that, although they run alongside each other, they're very separate kind of audiences and spaces within the industry. So it is a kind of, you are trusting the record label. I mean, I was quite vocal, you know, in the recording process of my first album. There was songs where I was like, I don't want to record that because I'm not going to sing that live. I don't like that song. And it was a collaborative project. But at the same time, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't have a clue. I was an 18-year-old teenager trying
Yeah.
to be like, is this the right way to do it? Is it not? You're learning as you go.
I do feel like it did sort of start a bit of a change in the output that came out the other side of the X Factor, and it did from that moment become a little bit more. Let's not just do the same songs that this person's performed. Let's actually explore some different directions that we could go from this, because we've talked about the X Factor before. You know, not launching Leona with a ballad, no one would have done that. You know, I think Alexandra Burke again. I think there was a fairly clear direction of where she would go, but I think Wide Awake was a really bold. I think it's probably the boldest to that point album that came out of the X Factor, if I do say so myself.
Thank you. That's very kind. I mean, that's very kind, and I have to be honest. You know, because it would be very easy for me to sit here now and say, "Oh yes," and we planned all of that, and like that was. But it was quite a natural kind of change in direction. It wasn't. It wasn't so much forced. It was kind of just trying to find a sound of where pop music was sitting at that time, and also that kind of navigation, like I said before, of coming off the show and trying to make some sort of impact that people wouldn't go, oh, okay, well, that's lovely, but I expected that, which would have been fine as well, and I'm sure it would have sold lots of records, So it wasn't a kind of big,
Mm.
bold artistic choice to be like, I'm going to go so far in a different direction it's going to shock people. I think
Amazing.
it was,
Yeah.
we knew a great song had landed on the doorstep, and we're like, let's go with this and let's run with it and see what happens.
I think for me, what you just said, Joe, is really interesting because you said it's where pop music was sitting at the time, and our we essentially do on this show songs from 1990 to usually 2009, but we do occasionally move into 2010. We like to make an exceptions every now and again, but I think there's the reason why we do that is often because of the way that pop music was sitting within that era. And that's sort of, like the before, the during, and the after of the Spice Girls reign. That's kind of what you usually use that frame as. And at this point, the X Factor was at a certain point. And you've just mentioned artists like, you mentioned like Mika, you mentioned the Scissor Sisters. And I felt like pop music was changing quite a lot, but you also had the influence of the digital era, and you're talking about different marketing strategies. So yeah, it's cool because we don't usually cover like songs kind of from this sort of era. But yeah, I loved the song
Yeah.
at the time. It is really nice to sort of revisit it and remember. I have such a distinct memory of this because like Joe, we've met, we've hilariously been on a cruise ship together doing our Jane McDonald's, just for the same time. But I think, and that was lovely, and we had a great time. But I think I mentioned to you at the time that we'd actually met years and years previously. But I didn't meet you as my ex-boyfriend, who less said about him the better. But he was like obsessed with you, like as in really obsessed. So it's somewhere in the vault. He's going to have a picture of you performing at the Nightingale Club in Birmingham, and then you did
Wow,
this
I
like
remember that.
yeah, you did like a meet and greet afterwards, but it was one of those like, 60,000 gays are just in a queue, just being like, when am I going to get my picture of Joe? And it was just like a carting one after another, one more twink, one more twink. So we met very briefly, me and my ex there. But I remember the song, I remember you performing it, and it went down an absolute storm, and I just felt like it tapped into this, just like a kind of a movement of what pop music was doing at the time. And maybe you would have done something differently if you'd been on the show 2 years previously. Maybe you'd have done something differently if you'd have been on it 4 years after. And we'll get to, we know you went on to do another talent show, and that then changed the career pathway from what you did.
I'm shocked that Matty has not said his catchphrase so far, which is, I bet Steps would do a great version of this song.
Oh,
oh my God, why was... I say it on every single episode. It's usually like Steps would do a great version of this, or Scared of the Dark is the answer to everything. But to be fair, oh my God,
version, I could see that.
Yeah.
I've got one note for the video, which is strong quiff, and it was strong. What's going on in this music video?
So we shot this music video in Bulgaria, and it was a studio that I believe was made to shoot a lot of some of the Game of Thrones stuff. I think that might be wrong, but I'm sure that was why it was. And it was a big kind of multi-lot place with lots of different, because basically the director Nigel Dick, who produced the video, and obviously had worked with the likes of Britney Spears, NSYNC, like some of the huge iconic pop videos of all time. And he was like, I want you to be walking through the streets of New York. And the record label like, yeah, but you don't know how much that's going to cost. Just shut down a street in New York for 5 hours to shoot a big dance sequence. And he was like, yeah, okay, fair. They found this studio in, and it does lend itself to that. It really gives that feel. And the opening sequence where I walk out of the American cab and up the street with the choreography. But I think it was kind of the idea was to kind of, you were traveling through all of these kind of incredible spaces, you know, and there was a kind of a big sequence which was looks kind of like a Roman Colosseum kind of statuesque museum building, and you're kind of you're just living your best life, really. I think that was the kind of a big, huge choreography driven video with lots of dancers. But we shot it in one day. It was a big video shoot in one day, a lot of scenes. And I flew out the night before. I learned the choreography with Beth Honan, who had done kind of a lot of Cheryl's iconic videos as well. She choreographed the video, and it was amazing. But I remember at the time, you turn up to this place, and the only other video I had shot was the climb, and that was in a studio with just me and a big kind of set behind you, and not all of these people relying on you. You turn up there and there's all these dancers and extras, and it was quite overwhelming, to be honest, because everybody's kind of looking at you to be the pop star, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm a pop star yet. Help!
But you were so young. You were so young at the time to be doing this massive production.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Nigel was great actually, and he really kind of grasped, which I assume, you know, is the way that he probably addresses every video and working with somebody. He kind of spent a little bit of time with us on the morning we had breakfast at the hotel. And I think he was just kind of sussing out the way that I would take direction and perform and stuff. And we just got into this kind of rhythm very quickly. And it was such a fun video to shoot. And the thing about the song as well is it is a great pop song. So the minute it starts, it kind of gives you that energy. And all of the dancers, I had a couple of my dancers from the UK that had flown out, and then there was about 100 people that were from Bulgarian dancers, that they had been brought in, kind of the best of the best from that country. And yeah, there was kind of a bit of a language barrier because some of them couldn't speak English, so it was kind of a work in progress to try and get everybody to do everything. But we pulled it together. It was a big old production.
I love that. I think, like, as I say, I haven't watched the video in quite some time. But as soon as I started watching it, I was like, oh, okay, this is all coming back to me. And what I will say about so with the dance routine, after doing some digging online, you had said previously that, like, were you not supposed to do it, and did you put your foot down and say, I want to do the choreography? Is that true?
So I think the idea at the beginning was that I would kind of be walking through everything, and I would kind of be the stillness in the kind of choreography of navigating through that. And I said to Beth, I said, I really want to dance on this song. Like, can we do something? And so we kind of came up with and her whole thing at that time, you know, she'd created the Fight for This Love choreography. She'd done so many
Iconic.
other, but she was like, and we'd had a meeting kind of a couple of weeks before, and she's like, you know, when I choreograph stuff, I always try and put something in there that when somebody hears that thing in the club, they know the move that matches the video or the song. And you know, everybody does the Fight for This Love hand or whatever, you know, when people know that choreography, but they do, you know, and you see people even now when it comes on. So and you know, I get a lot of people the minute the song starts when I do it on tour. You know, I was on tour at the end of last year, and the minute the chorus hits, you see everybody's arms go up in the audience, which is brilliant because it's like that song's nearly 15 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that has stuck with people's memory of like them remembering that. And so I am glad that I kind of pushed to include choreography in that, because I do think the song lends to it.
But I think the choreography, what she's done is very clever there, because I'm not saying that it's like easy, but it's simplistic enough that people can do it back to you in an audience. Like, in terms of it is the moves move and then this sort of thing. And I think that, but that's really clever, because it must be great as an artist. Like, I can imagine you as like back as like an 18, 19-year-old lad, like seeing like audiences do that back. That must have been an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it was. And you know, it's amazing, you know, when you kind of release a song or you do stuff. I was just talking about this not long ago about another project that I was doing. You rarely kind of ever get to, apart from in the moment with an audience, you rarely kind of ever get to revisit the impact or the feeling that it made people feel at the time. And even now, you know, so many years later, when I do my shows, to see that, you're kind of like, oh wow, that really kind of made a lasting impression on people, you know it. And that's a special feeling when you've kind of put something in a box. And obviously I still sing it at every concert and gig, and it's still a big part of my repertoire. But you know, the kind of the feelings that you have attached to it, each project kind of get tied up in a little box and put away, and then you move on to the next thing. But things like that are kind of those reminding memories of like, oh wow, that was pretty cool.
Great.
Still
Craig, have
just
you got any more thoughts on the video?
strong quiff. Still thinking about that quiff.
The quick.
So the thing is, so the part of the video was I'm always looking for something which is unintentionally funny. But what I really love is when you go up to the guy who's got all the papers and you go like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm going to put all these together. I'm going to give these back to you. And then he goes, ta-da, and throws them anyway. And I just thought, I'd have been livid. Like...
And that guy's actually a friend of mine. He's called Liam, and he danced with me for quite a number of years after that. And I remember on the day, because it was quite a big shot, and they had this huge crane arm thing that swoops in to get those cinematic shots, and he kept throwing the paper, and for whatever reason, either the wind would catch it or the way he'd thrown it, it hadn't kind of dispersed evenly for the kind of cinematic photo. And we had to do it quite a number of times, and he was, bless him, he was getting really stressed. He's like, I just need to throw the paper. I can't throw the paper. Why can't I throw the paper? It became a real kind of sticking point. And I was like, just throw it. Don't think about it. Just throw it. But so it's interesting that you picked up on that, because that was probably the most stressful part of the day for him.
I loved it. It stuck out. I absolutely loved it. Craig, so that's what we all think of the song, of the video, but give us the rundown. What happened when the song was released? And then
okay, so the song was digitally released on the 10th of October. God, we're in the digital era. It's very distressing. 10th of October, and it was released on CD single 11th of October, because say anything about the X Factor, they loved a physical release, and we cling on to that. And it peaked at number 6. And now normally we'd have some discussion about that. I feel a little bit self-conscious to comment on that. But I mean, look, neither of us have got a top 10 single, so but I feel like, knowing the X Factor, knowing the machine, that someone might have gone, "Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen." But am I being unfair?
No, I think the expectation is it's funny, isn't it? It's funny, like hindsight is a wonderful thing, because now people would absolutely kill for a number 6 single, which is, and some of the biggest artists in the world don't even get a number 6 single now, which is crazy to believe that. But it's funny how the kind of landscape of that has changed, because back then, they wanted it, they were, and make no mistake, from the minute you started recording that album, there was conversations about this has to be a number 1, and you certainly felt that pressure as a X Factor winner and an artist or whatever. And it was kind of, everything was banked on it being a number 1 single, and everything was banked on it being playlisted by Radio 1 and playlisted by, I think it was it Capital then? It might have been something different, but the equivalent of Capital. And at that point in time, if you didn't get a playlist on Capital, you would not have a number 1 single, which, I personally, I still find that crazy that dictates the charts, because that's essentially, the top 10 of whatever the Capital playlist was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it was just the same songs on rotation, which I think still does kind of play into that, but streaming has taken away that power slightly. But yeah, I mean, you are right in saying, they were kind of like, oh, we were hoping at least for a top 3, and if not a number 1, and it didn't get playlisted on Capital for, I'm sure at the time there was like a whole Simon Cowell behind the scenes row with the owner of Capital Radio, and the owner of Capital Radio had the Wanted that were out the same week, and they didn't want me to be on the playlist because they wanted the Wanted to chart higher than me. And it was a lot of politics at the time, back in the day, which I think more and more people hear about now and people talk about more now. But at that point in time, it was just like, oh, the single got to number 6. I mean, I was over the moon with that. and the album I think was top 5. I think the album went in at number 3 or 4. I can't really remember.
Yeah, it was number 3.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go. It's just like we're going to cement that for you there, babe. You got a number 3 album. It was fantastic.
But yeah,
we had a copy. So I feel like there's a lot to be said about how well you, as a young guy, like relatively young in terms of an X Factor winner at the time, to have how well you coped with that, because rather than it feel like a bit of a disappointment, you were like, oh, but this was great. Like, I've got a top 10 single, I've got a top 5 album. And then we know that you then went on to do so many more things with your career, and that was like brilliantly successful. And I feel it's really interesting. We talk about it a lot, comparing what the music industry is like now to what it was, particularly back in like the 90s and the noughties. And we're talking about a slightly different era here and now, the digital. And it's just, isn't it just mental how much the charts and music and our perception of what a pop star is has changed in the last 30 years or so? Because we wouldn't have been talking about those things. Whereas I just love that now there's a real transparency of, I feel like if it was public knowledge that, record company execs were pulling strings in the same way of like going to labels and doing radio stuff, if that was to ever come out now about something that was happening now, it would be everywhere on social media. People will be talking about it. Whereas there wasn't those sort of platforms then. And yeah, I think about it quite a lot.
And I think we've moved through we now live in a kind of not as glossy era of music and entertainment, where people do understand that it's not all kind of roses behind the scenes, and that it's not all these glittery corridors of fabulous, and that it is quite a ruthless business. You've got big artists, what was really inspiring for me a couple of years ago, because going back quickly to then make a point about what you just said, when that whole chart thing happened with me in the beginning, and not forgetting, obviously, previous to that, I'd had the whole Rage Against the Machine chart battle, like with The Climb. So
yes,
I quite quickly realised how the kind of charts could dictate things. And but in a way, it was the biggest blessing for me in my career moving forward, because it instantly took that pressure away. And I think when you take that pressure away, you're not on that conveyor belt and that rat race of trying to I was like, listen, I want to still be doing this in 15 years' time. And I still want to have a great career and be doing what I do. My goal at that point in time was not to have, most of the people that have gone on the show, yes, some of them might have had a huge number 1 hit and then, had a top 10 hit or whatever. But like, I wanted to have a long kind of career that spanned many, many years. That was always my goal. I didn't, it would be lovely to have a number 1 record. And it is lovely for like 5 minutes, but once you've had it, you've had it. You know what I mean? It's like, It's a very weird thing, because you're like, okay, great, that's number 1, because I have had a number 1 record, and it's a wonderful feeling for about 30 minutes, and then straight away, everyone's like, right, so what are you going to do next then, and what's happening now? So it doesn't really mean it. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, that's
I think it. I suppose I think a lot about the X Factor, because it was a massive part of all of our lives. I think anyone who had an interest in popular culture and pop music. But I listened to an album like Wide Awake, and I think I have to tell Simon Cowell how to do his job, but I think the mistake is that the expectation is that every single album will have the same level of success. And I don't mean this disrespectfully. I wouldn't listen to Wide Awake and think this is going to be a success on the same level of Spirit. It's a different style of music. It's got a different audience. It's got different airplay potential. And I think that was the fundamental flaw, one of them, with the X Factor, is you can't create the same level of success for every person, for every sound, because that just doesn't happen. That's not how the charts have ever worked.
I think, but I don't think that was the goal. I think my experience of it is this is a conveyor belt, that this show is going to churn out at least 3 artists every year, and we're gonna plow a load of money into all 3 of them, or 2 of them, or 1 of them, and whichever one works we'll run with. That's kind of, I think that is the formula. You know, I don't think it's anything
Yeah.
more thought out than that. And I think, you know, with Leona, to use her as an example, I think she was the first artist from one of those shows that had crossed over into the American art market, which instantly changes the whole game of how it works in terms of UK and America and the rest of the kind of territories around the world. So I don't think it's a expectation of the both albums like they're going to be the same. I think it's we're just going to put money into these three people and whoever works we're going to run with, which is, if you can do that, is great. But if you want a long career and you want to have a kind of, if you want to develop yourself as an artist, then it's a difficult space to exist in. Um, it's a great platform, but it's a difficult space to exist in if you then become on that kind of conveyor belt, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You made it sound like it was the Psycho Hunger Games of just like,
It was.
we're just going to put all these acts.
I mean, it was. You look at how many artists they churned out over a period of 10 years. It was, I mean, you know, and listen, I'm never going to sit here and slag off the X Factor, and it's given me the most incredible stepping stones and opportunities to create a life that I never would have imagined, you know, that I still get to do now and live a dream every day. And for that, I am forever thankful. But I think kind of coming off the show into that kind of record industry, it can be very difficult coming off a reality show. And I think we hear about it more and more now, which is nice to kind of, it makes you feel slightly validated. And when you hear other people explaining the stories, you're like, oh, it wasn't just me. Okay, fair enough. You know, and, but I do say I was very lucky because I kind of clocked that. I clocked that quite early on, and I made changes in my career very, very early on to kind of, to ensure that I was in control moving forward, if that makes sense.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No,
Craig,
that's great.
That probably leads us very
Yes.
nicely onto, let's do some interview questions, shall we?
Yeah. So so just in terms of Wide Awake, obviously you didn't get to release many singles from it, but if there was one song that you wish from that album more people had heard, which one is it?
Do you know what I'm going to say? Fahrenheit, actually. I think Fahrenheit would be a fantastic pop song now as well. I think you could release Fahrenheit now and it would stand up with the kind of music. It was a great song. I wish I'd wrote that song as well because it's a real fun, energetic song. And again, you know, I've still performed that in tours over the years. I performed it just last year actually on a concert that I did. And again, the audience really loved that song. So yeah, I'll say Fahrenheit.
Amazing. But I think that's the standout track for me as well. Like I loved listening to the album again before this interview. I was like, oh wow, I remember this is an absolute banger. So
I just want to shout out to Until the Stars Run Out because
actually that is a tune.
That is a tune, and it's also one of those you're like, is this actually happening? Which I always love in it. I always love that in pop music.
Yeah, that is it. Do you know what? I forgot about that one. That is a tune. I do love that
song. So as a slightly different tangent for you musically, you went on to appear and win, you know, a double reality winner. You were pop star to opera star in 2011. I've heard you talk about this experience before, but how sort of in a nutshell did the two experiences compare to each other?
Well, Pop Star Opera Star was a real kind of fun project for me. You know, they'd asked us to be a part of it, and I didn't really think it was going to give us an album of material of classical crossover music. I didn't even think I would release anything like that. That was not why I went on the show. It was just a fun television show that was on TV at the time, and they said, "Would you like to do it?" And I was like, yeah, I can have a bit of fun with that. And it's something different and it just shows a different side to you. And as I got onto the show, you know, they genuinely teach you how to sing classical crossover music and you learn all this technique. But then I started obviously to get interest. And by that point, I'd been dropped by Simon's label. So I was a kind of independent artist at that time. And Universal had approached us towards I think it was maybe 3 days before the final, and they said, you know, listen, we're really interested in releasing an album of this material, like you've made an impact on this kind of audience, and we can tell that there's an appetite there for you to release some of this music. So, you know, let's have a chat next week. Let's hope you win the show, and um, and we'll pick things up there.
No pressure.
Yeah. So I won the show on the Sunday, and I got a phone call that next morning from the A&R of Decca Records under the Universal umbrella, and they said, "Can you come to the offices on, I think it was the Tuesday?" I arrived on the Tuesday, signed the deal by the Wednesday, and by the Thursday night, I was in the studio recording the album, and we recorded the whole thing in, I think we recorded it in 7 days, and then it was released the following week. So we recorded the album, shot a video and a photo shoot at the same time, and the album came out. It was all done within 2 weeks, and it was the most. I've never worked on a schedule like that. I was in the studio like 10 till 11 every day, and yeah, we smashed it out there. But they were like, let's jump on the wave of this success and see what happens. And it was a huge success for us. It's like a number 2 album, and it sold a lot of records. And yeah, it was an amazing surprise, because it was not expected in any way, shape, or form. And it was kind of lovely as well, because I'd been battered by the press a little bit after the whole dropping of the Simon thing and the kind of the rollout of what we've just discussed. And it was a great kind of like 2 fingers up to be like, haha, you'd written us off, but here I am.
Yeah, I mean,
I literally was like, my next question, I was like, yeah, were you a bit like, but
I was, you know, because I was, because without getting into the kind of major details of it, because I'll save that for my autobiography.
Fine.
I wasn't treated very fairly towards the end, which I dealt with at the time, and I've kind of, you know, I left that situation kind of quite abruptly and was like, I don't want to be a part of this. But it was a great kind of feeling to know, because at the same time, what you've got to remember is I was 20 years old as well. I was young. And I was like, I was thinking to myself in the back of my mind, am I making the right decision? Have I just threw away my whole career? And then something like that comes along, and you get that real moment of going, actually, it's like somebody kind of looking down on you going, keep going. You're doing the right thing. You're on the right track. So it was a lovely kind of pat on the back, you know?
I love that.
Me too.
And not just a double TV talent show winner, but actually a triple TV talent show winner, because then you appeared on and won The Jump in 2014. And I have to ask, why? Because I could not imagine anything worse than doing that.
Well, I can ski and have been skiing since I was about 10 years old. So that initial fear that you would normally get from something, that kind of phone call coming through to ask you to do something, was not as stressful to me. And I was actually on a skiing holiday when I got asked to do it, because basically I think they'd run out of people that were signed up to do the show, because they were all getting injured and having problems by falling over or being dangerous.
Oh God!
And one of the producers,
so I shouldn't laugh.
Yeah, no, but it was such a dangerous show. It was amazing to film, but it was a dangerous show. And one of the producers that I worked with on X Factor had seen on social media that I was in Austria at the time, and she called us and she said, "This sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I've seen you're in Austria." And she was like, "You don't happen to have 2.5, 3 weeks free in your diary when you get back?" And I was going on tour, like I think maybe a month or 2 after my skiing holiday. So I'd been working really hard. I'd planned to have kind of a month and a half off work before I went on tour. So I said, well, funny enough, I'm on holiday for a month. I've got a month off. And she was like, if we call your management, how quick could we get you in a car to this other ski resort? So they called the management, they rang us, and by 6 p.m. that night, there was a car picking us up from my family holiday in Austria. And I drove like 3 hours across Austria, and I started filming at 6 a.m. the next morning. So it was another kind of accident in my career that I wasn't supposed to be a part of. But what I've learned is those are the best job opportunities. When something like that happens, it happens so quickly, and you don't have any time to second guess or question, that it just makes it a really great like experience.
I'm obsessed
I mean,
with
it
this
still
idea.
sounds awful.
I love the idea. I just love that things just get thrown. Like Joe Curveball McElderry, just like, here we are. We're now we're going to be a fighter pilot. Now we're going to go on this show. We're going to do this. Like, absolutely. I just love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it keeps it fresh. Keeps it fresh for you. You to just throw it back to something on the X Factor, but then what you've done more recently is you duetted with George Michael when you were on the show, the late great George Michael, and then you did like a tour of his music. Did that feel like a real full circle experience? How was that for you?
It was. I was approached. I think it was just at the end of lockdown by Live Nation and Cuff and Taylor, and they said, "Would you be interested in going on a tour to celebrate George Michael's music? You know, or well, you know, honor him, or however you want to kind of put it." And I said, "Yes, I will." But I said, I want to make it very clear that I want it to be honoring him in concert. I don't want it to be a tribute show. It's not a tribute show. I'm not trying to be him. I don't want to be him. He's his own fantastic talent. And I was very kind of set on the fact that if it was going to be done, I was like, I want to honor him in concert, you know, and honor the music. So it was such an amazing experience to want to get to sing as a male singer. And I think he is one of the best male singers of all time, you know, and also one of the best producers and songwriters of all time as well, which I don't sometimes think he gets enough credit for that side of his career either. And to get to sing that every night, but also to get to dive through that catalogue and go back through it all and listen to it when you're trying to put the set list together and learn some of the melodies and like specific ways of writing that he had it was just for a fan of his music was such a special thing. And then to go out on the road with a band and get to sing it in front of packed audiences that have come to celebrate that music, it was probably one of my favorite tours that I've done, because it was just, I was so nervous to do it and I was so conscious of not disrespecting his music, that it was, when we did it and we got out there and felt the love from the audience, it was really special.
That's beautiful. Yeah, my mum was obsessed with George Michael. I grew up listening to him. So like, you know, it's good that, you know, people are wanting to honor his legacy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Craig?
My mum's never got over the fact that she still was, to the day he died, was adamant that if she met him, she could turn him. And I kept and I think she will forever feel that was her missed opportunity. But she said it to the day he died.
Whatever helps you sleep at night is what you should say.
Joe, that has to be a segue. I've got to get this story in here. But do you remember when we were on the ship and my group came to watch you perform, and you were absolutely wonderful. It was such a gorgeous show. And we were sat in the corner, and you just nonchalant just made a joke about like, oh, well, if anyone's got, you know, if there's any like any rich men here, you know, like I'm still looking for my husband. And this, like probably about 70-year-old woman at a table having dinner audibly gasped, clutched her pearls, and then she just went, oh, he's gay. Like, and it was so funny because I was like, girl, like read the room, but also
I was probably standing there in a sequin jacket as well.
You were in a sequin jacket. It was so sparkly, and not that, you know, you weren't like coming out in a bloody feather bow or anything like that, but it was just like, you're not hiding it, and it was just the funniest reaction. But I don't know how you feel, but there's definitely, I think some people think that they can go out at sea and like just like be completely ignorant, and like whatever happens there is whatever they want to say. I just thought it was so funny.
I could write a book. I could write a book of things that people have said to me over the years, and it would probably be the most entertaining book of like little sayings that people have stopped you on the street and said things, and that would definitely be included in that.
It was just so audible, and she literally shot up from her dinner table. I was like really struggling to not laugh.
I love
Craig, have you got another question?
So, some of your more recent songs that you've done. So, like, Baby Had Your Fun and LOVE. Are we spelling that out? They link quite nicely, I feel, back into the style of Ambitions and Wide Awake. So, was that ever in your? Were you like, I want to go back and do a bit more of this sound?
Yeah, I wrote those songs with a writer of mine that I actually worked with on my 4th album, the Here's What I Believe album. And that was the first time I'd done songwriting for my own music. And Helen Bolden kind of really took us under her wing, and she was like, you've got a lot to say, like, you should write more. And, songwriting is a whole different ball game to kind of recording and performing. And you do have to kind of be a little bit more vulnerable and kind of open in a room with people, certainly if you're doing it with other writers as well. And me and Helen just got on really well. We'd sit and have a coffee and, slag the industry off as you do, and say what you're annoyed about, say what you're frustrated with, and or even if I was going through a breakup or a heartbreak or a situationship with someone, and we'd kind of have a whinge and a moan, and then she'd be like, "There's a title in that, like that you've just said," and we'd always start our days like with that kind of way of working. And so I worked with her on the Here's What I Believe album, and we always stayed in touch and kept good friends. And then during lockdown and just before lockdown, we wrote quite a lot together. And Baby Had Your Fun was one of the first ones we'd written together in a while. And I just said to her, I was like, I want to make a fun pop song that you can dance to. That was literally when we got in there on the morning that we were working together. I was like, I really just want to, as if you were in a nightclub, and a song, but also something that you can sing along to as well. And it was kind of a fun breakup song of like taking the kind of narrative back of, I was like, when you have a breakup with somebody, everybody kind of imagines you're sitting on the sofa and eating ice cream and downing 3 bottles of wine to feel sorry for yourself. And I was like, no, I was like, I want to write the song where you're putting your glad rags on and you're just going to dance it off on a dance floor and have a great time and be like, F you. So that was, yeah. And then LOVE was a real anthem about celebrating who you are. And, at the time, there was a lot of kind of discourse going on with lots of different things and in politics and the world, and people just being awful to one another on social media, and kind of certainly the kind of minorities and being awful to them. And I was like, I want to write a song that celebrates people, no matter who you are. You should be proud of who you are and celebrate that. So that's where that song came from. And I'd been sat on the LOVE song for quite a long time because I'd written that years and years ago, and then we kind of reimagined that version. I think, was it last year or the year before?
So we briefly mentioned it. We're talking about musical theatre. You are currently on tour with Joseph, but you're not playing Joseph as Joe. You are the Pharaoh, aren't you? You're the Pharaoh.
No.
Obviously, like with pop, classical, and musical theatre under your belt, and really wonderful career. How do you find changing voice types? This is a really technical question from one singer to another, but like, do you find it difficult to flip between them? Do you find that you have to like, or do you find that you found like a good mix that you can sort of move in and out of different styles?
Well, I think the classical crossover singing is a real kind of technical way it's probably the safest way of singing, and that has allowed me to tour extensively, and maintain a standard of vocal because of those techniques. And so I'm forever thankful for that. It is a different way of singing. And, sometimes I do have to kind of mentally, if I've gone from singing like in my shows as well, I am very much I'm like everything, including the kitchen table. Let's throw it in there and give them everything. There is a real. We will go from Time to Say Goodbye, Nessun Dorma to Ambitions, and Fahrenheit and everything more. Like it really is a diverse range of music. And then I'll do musical theatre, and I'll do a piano moment where I sit down with me MD, and it's just stripped back. So I am very much about kind of cramming all of those genres into a show. you do have to kind of remind yourself after singing Nessun Dorma and Time to Say Goodbye, and then you go to sing a kind of light, airy pop song. You're like, I do have to kind of be like, right, let's tone down the vibrato, let's. And but I think naturally the styles kind of leads the way you sing with that, you know, and also I've been doing it for long enough now that I kind of know how to get into that switch very quickly. You know, I know how to get that placement straight away to sing Nessun Dorma, or if it's a musical. And, you know, with musical theatre, you can massively adapt that classical training to musical theatre, and it really, really, really helps, you know, especially if you're tired or run down or you've got a bug. So I've worked out the format now, but I did a classic at the end of last year. My tour was called the Classic Collection, and it was all that genre of music. It was and it was an amazing show, but it was a lot of like massive, massive songs to sing every night. But ironically, it was probably the easiest show that I've done because I was instantly in that proper technique that I was the least vocally tired I've ever been because I was so aware of using that technique all the time that it was really safe and it felt strong. And so yeah, pop singing is actually harder than the classical style for me. I think it's not as a safe way of singing, if that makes sense.
I totally agree, and I'm going to take that sound bit and I'm going to give it to my students that I teach, and just being like, listen to Joe. This is someone who has mastered their craft of jumping between styles. Right, Craig, do you want to take? There's a couple of we got a couple of silly questions and a couple of pop music ones now. So do you want to take this one?
I clearly have no musical training. I think you sound fabulous, but on a technical level, no idea what you're doing. Okay. What is the highest peak you've ever climbed?
Nice segue from the climb.
I have. I mean, I have climbed Helvellyn. I've been up to almost to the top of Helvellyn, which is is a mountain. If we're talking literally climbing, if we're talking a figure of speech, I would say just climbing the music industry is the biggest peak you could ever climb.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And climbing the realms.
Okay, like turn my question around on me and throw it back at me. I'm gonna have that. Right. What are you
obsessed?
You've achieved so much, but what are your future ambitions?
I wanted now kind of, and I really kind of had adopted this attitude when I came out of lockdown of that I have experienced a lot of things at a very young age and at the very kind of forefront of my career. So when I turned 30, I was like, I want to have fun. I want to still love what I do, which I do now. And if something comes along that I think I can have a good time and have some fun with it and learn something new, then that is kind of where I will go with it. There's obviously, I'd love to release music outside of the UK. I've never done that. That would be something I'd love to do. But I also love to travel with me work outside of the UK as well and see the world, kill two birds with one stone. So, yeah, that's kind of, and I'd love to do a musical film. I think to do a musical film would be amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. Let's get the movie companies on the phone. Let's do it. Let's do Joe McElderry the musical. There we go. We can make that happen.
Oh, wow.
Right. So these are a couple of like just quick fire pop music questions. We do everything from sort of bubblegum pop to like X Factor pop to different styles from this era. So, who's your favorite girl band ever?
Ooh. Now that's a hard one. Do you know what I'm gonna say though? I'm gonna go with Girls Aloud.
Yes, there's only one answer to that. I'm sorry.
You what?
I said there's only one answer to that. I'm like the Girls Aloud stan here, so like I feel like the only other answer that I think you could say would be Spice Girls, but yeah, it's got to be Girls Aloud, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'd go Spice Girls as well. I'd choose Girls Aloud.
Yeah, stunning.
Craig? Steps or S Club 7?
Oh, I'm gonna go Steps.
They do a great version of Fahrenheit.
Right. They would do a great version of Fahrenheit. Maybe that's what you should do, Joe. Maybe you should like slip into Claire Rich's DMs and just be like, babe.
She's a really good friend of mine. And I'm seeing her tomorrow, so I'll pitch that to her tomorrow.
What you could do is you could take Wide Awake and do the whole blank thing and say, I've got this CD here of songs that I think would be really good for steps. Just slide it to her.
There you go. Try them. There's the covers.
What was the first album that you ever owned?
Spice Girls. But I think it was a cassette.
Yeah.
I bought the cassette from HMV. And it was I can't remember which one it was. It was the one with the spice, and they were all on the little figures were on the top of the bottom of the letters. Yeah. Got a cassette. That's crazy.
Stunning. And then I think this might be the last question.
So just favourite pop music video and why? Just of all that have ever existed.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's hard. Can you tell me what yours are, by the way? And then that might help me.
I think Kylie Can't Get It On My Head.
Okay, I was going to
just
Kylie
iconic,
spinning around with
beautiful.
hot pants.
There you go. Yeah,
I think
solid
mine was
choice.
Kylie as well. Mine's Come Into My World because I think that is high art.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay,
a clean sweep of Kylie's there.
I'll go Kylie, but then also I do also love Beyonce's Sweet Dreams. I think that's a very cool pop video as well.
You know what? People sleep on that song, and that's still like sort of been like lost in the Beyonce discography of just like as a Sasha Fierce tune.
It's
banging. Absolute banger. Well, Joe, thank you so much. You have given us so much of your time. This has been absolutely wonderful, and just thank you for coming back and reliving this really wonderful pop song. Like, we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for delving into it. I've enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. If you want to listen to Ambitions by Joe McElderry, and why would you not, then you can find it on streaming. And Craig, where can they find us?
Can't Stop the Pop has a website where there are over 500 reviews, which you can find at can'tstopthepop.com.
We are also on social media. I am Matt_Atkins9 on Instagram, and you can find us on TikTok at Can't Stop the Pop Podcast, where we basically do this, but in 60-second clips, and we do reaction videos as well. But also, Joe, do you want to give out some shout-outs to your socials, and what are you doing on the road at the moment?
Yes, so you can find me at Joe McElderry Official on Instagram and Joe McElderry... I can't remember the rest of them. Just go to joemckelderofficial.com.
And you're on tour with Joseph?
Yes, and I'm on tour with Joseph until August, and then I go on my own solo tour in September and October. But if you go to joemckelderofficial.com, everything you need is there.
There we go. Also, do subscribe to our channels. Get in touch. Let us know what you think of the song. What you think of the show, and please leave us a review, but only a good one, wherever you get your podcast from. And
I am at Can't Stop the Pop, or Can't Stop _the Pop on Instagram and TikTok. We are also Can't Stop the Pop on YouTube.
And thank you so much for listening, and join us next time for more
Can't Stop the Pop.